Hello and welcome back to this video. In this video, we are going to start working with object-oriented programming. And for this video, we are going to be dealing with Python classes. So first of all, what is a class? Well, a class is like a generic name, okay? It's like a blueprint that houses all the features that a certain type of object should have. So when we were working with our data types, we did something like we created a string variable. I can just print a normal string right now. So I'll just type in string here so that I will not waste your time. And then I'm going to call the type function on this. So I'm going to just save this and run. And here we have that the data I just entered is in the class of string. So I'm going to change the data and I'm going to add in an integer. Okay, so we have a class int, right? So, and I'm going to write 1.2, and this time around we'll have the class of float. Okay, so now all of these data types, they are defined in a class. So I'm going to do something real quick. So I'm going to write the str method that we have been using, and I'm going to hold Control key and click this str that I wrote. So don't tamper with this, but this is, you can see that this str is defined as a class. So we have the keyword class just before it, and then we have this str, and then we have every other thing that defines everything that is peculiar to the items that meet the standard of this str. Okay, so by the time you type in a piece of text or you type in a data, Python will be able to evaluate that, okay, this data has the features of the class of str. Okay, so we are going to be learning how to create our own classes, because even as we have the general classes, we can create our unique classes. And if you are able to create your own object, then you'll be able to define the features or the things that are expected of those objects that you create. So now, how do you create your class? If you want to create your class, the first thing you're going to do is to write your class keyword. So you just write class, and then you give a space, and then you write your class name. So I'm going to enter the name, and I'm going to call it new class. And then I'm going to end it with a colon. Now, look at the naming convention. When you are creating a class, you are to start the class name with an uppercase. Okay? The naming convention most of the time is to capitalize the words that you use to create your class. Now, we saw the str class and it was written in lowercase, and that's probably because it's an inbuilt class in Python. So, but when you're creating your own class, when a third-party class is being created, it must be written in uppercase. Okay? So if you write your class name, you end it with the semicolon. Then under this class, as you can see, Visual Studio Code already indented this block for us. And here you are going to define all the attributes, all the methods that are peculiar to this class. So now, what are attributes and methods? When we were working with variables and when we were working with functions, if we create a variable, we just give it a name and then we pass in a method onto that variable, right? So, and when we were working with function, if we define your function, we are going to pass in something like parameters that you'll be expecting that those items should be passed into that function as arguments. So now when you are defining a class, there are some peculiarities you are expecting or that you're going to define for that particular class. Okay, so assuming I'm going to create a class for ladies that I feel should go for pageantry, right? I should be looking at the lady's height, the lady's weight, the lady's complexion, right? Sorry, I'm not stereotyping, but I'm just relating it to real life examples so that you understand what I'm trying to explain. So now, if you want to define your class, we are going to state all the things that you are expecting as the future of the items in that class, right? So let's say the height, the weight, and everything that you're expecting from a lady that should come for your pageantry, then you should set all those items. You should set all those criteria. Imagine it as your attribute. Now, when it comes to method, let's use our pageantry example again. So, and apart from the features that the physical features you're expecting, you're going to define some functions that they are going to perform, right, during the course of that pageantry. So that is liken it to the method. So like we already know, a method is a function. So all the functions that you are going to use, all those criteria that they should meet to perform becomes the method, right? So now, this will take us to the next item that we have on our list, and that is the init function. So what is an init function? Well, An init function is also called the constructor function. And this init function, what does it do? Just like when we want to create our function, we define it, we write the name, maybe name, and inside our parentheses, we pass in our parameters, maybe age and height, or you can even use your letters just to represent the number of items that you're expecting. You can use S and B, anything. You also need to create the methods that are peculiar to this class. But the very first method that you're going to create is the init function. So init is a short form of initialization. And what does this init function do? It holds all the variables that are going to be needed by that class, right? So the way you pass in variables as parameters in your function, you're also going to pass in variables as parameters in the init function, right? And that is where you define them, so that when these variables are coming in, Python will know that this variable belongs to this class, right? So now I'm going to quickly define the init function. So it's just like we define our usual function. We use the def keyword and then we give space. But this time around, we are going to write something that is a bit tricky. So I'm going to write double underscore init and then close it with this double underscore. Then I open and close my parentheses and I end it with a semicolon, just like we have been doing before. And inside this place, we are going to pass in something that is very important. So this particular variable or this particular parameter that we are passing in here, it is generally used. Although it does not have to be the exact word, but the naming convention is that you pass in self to this init function, right? So this self must be passed in. And then you can pass in any other thing that you want to define that this class is going to be needing. So if I'm going to be needing people's height for this class, I am going to pass in height, right? So if I'm going to be needing maybe weight or color, so I'm going to say color and whatever thing I need. Then on the next line, I am going to say that self.height is equals height, right? And then that self.color is equals color. So right now, this is the basic structure of how you create your class, right? So these are the important things you need to do when you're creating your class. You write the keyword class, you write the class name, and then you end it with a colon. Then you create your initialization method, and then you pass in self. After you pass in self, you are going to enter all other parameters that you are going to be needing for that particular class, and then you set them to the parameter that you passed. Okay, so that whenever I create another function, maybe running, so maybe running, let's say we are working with humans. So, and I'm going to say print, well, maybe self.height, right? Or self.color, right? So this is how to access all of this variable. So, and by the time I print this, whatever the member of that class, so don't worry about that. We are going to instantiation very soon. So by the time you instantiate this class, whatever be the value of height for the instance of that class or the object of that class comes out here to print. Okay, so I hope this is a bit not confusing, but if there are any questions, you feel free to reach out through our mentorship platform, and we'll always be there to guide you through your difficulties. So thank you so much for watching this video, and see you in the next one.